Your client's nervous system is running the show. If you do not do anything about it, you're not going to be coaching as well. I'm Ruth Kudzi. This is the Coaching Hub. Today, we're talking about nervous systems. So our nervous system is there to protect us and to keep us safe. And we are anticipatory beings. So what that means is our senses, our nervous system, our brain is always scanning the environment to anticipate and perceive if there are any threats. Now, physical threats, if we hear a roar. I remember once I was in the jungle in Sumatra and I heard a tiger roar. My nervous system was activated. I was quite glad that I wasn't at the edge of the tent. Never saw the tiger, but it's there. When we have some kind of noise or physical threat, our nervous system is activated. But it's also activated if we perceive or anticipate a psychological threat. That could be going into a networking event on your own. That's one for me. It could be doing a podcast. It could be having a conversation with your boss about a pay rise. It could be replying to an email when you feel that someone's criticized you. It could be speaking up in a meeting. It could be having a discussion with your partner. It could be having to sack somebody, etc., etc., etc. It could be something tiny. But again, perceive and anticipate. So our nervous system is trying to work out, is this safe or unsafe? And if we think there is anything that might make something unsafe, noradrenaline, adrenaline, norepinephrine are released. And what they do is that sends a signal to the brain, or the brain releases, and our emotional state changes. We then go into what is called the sympathetic nervous system. I don't know why it's called sympathetic, because for me, it's not very sympathetic. And what happens then? Our relational ability is not as good. We are less able to connect and build relationships. We cognitively have less energy in the prefrontal cortex and surrounding areas, actually less blood flow. And those areas are where we do our decision making, problem solving, focus, short-term memory. So when we are in that system, our body and our brain's number one focus is keeping us alive and safe. So they are looking at that threat. And therefore, we are not operating at our best. Emotionally, we will be either in fight, flight, or freeze. So when we are in fight, it means that we're moving towards the threat. We might be irritated, annoyed. We might be frustrated, angry. If you're thinking about emotions, it's like those emotions that we often associate with the color red, but those emotions. Or we might be in flight, moving away. So we're starting to feel anxious, worried, panicked. Or we might be in freeze. So we start to disassociate. We don't move. We stop. Now, when we're coaching, first of all, remember it's nervous system to nervous system. And actually, we can regulate and co-regulate nervous systems. And we probably know this on some level, that when we are with somebody who seems very anxious, it makes us anxious, doesn't it? Does anyone know that? I've got a friend who I love, and I have said to her, another friend doesn't want to actually hang out with her so much. And she was like, well, what's going on? And I said, because they are suffering from anxiety and you are suffering from anxiety, they feel that it's multiplying. And so I coached my friend. She did give me permission, but we talked about how she could regulate herself especially with this other friend, because their nervous systems were kind of competing with each other and they were both becoming highly anxious. This happens for all of us. But when we're coaching, we need to make sure that we are in the right state, nervous system wise, before we go into the session. So a few things that we can do. We can do some breathing, visualization, journaling, movement, silence, space. We can create a ritual like lighting a candle or an incense stick. I love incense. Whatever it may be, we can dance. We can listen to music. But the goal is to feel more relaxed, but also to check in emotionally, because those emotions are a little bit of a window into our nervous system. So just ask yourself, how am I feeling? Okay, how can I feel calmer, connected, confident? Those types of words are much more when we're regulated. So first of all, it's our state. And we actually have a model at Optimus that I designed, which is called the selfless model. And our state as coaches is the first element of that. You can find out more about that. I've done videos and podcasts on it in the past. So state is key. So it is for us, but it also is for our client. Now, of course, we can notice when they first come in, how are they operating? And so we're looking at clues. Now, I always say as coaches, we're like detectives. So we might notice their body language. We might notice that they're maybe like they're moving their fingers a lot, or they're moving their hands, or maybe they're kind of touching their body more. Maybe that's showing that they're a bit anxious. Again, always be curious, ABC, when we explore, but just these little cues, this difference that we notice. Maybe their pace of speech has sped up. Maybe their face has changed. Actually, when we are more in our sympathetic nervous system, we don't have as varied facial expressions. So maybe we notice a little bit of what seems like disassociation or blankness. Again, exploring, I would not label, oh, you look a bit blank, but noticing a change, what's going on, or it seems, or it feels like, or just, how are you doing? We might also notice the emotions, yeah? So actually, the nervous system is leaking data the whole time. Body language, emotions, tone of voice, speed of voice. Actually, what I was saying about the brain, we might notice that people get stuck, or they're struggling to focus, or they keep forgetting what they're saying. All of these are clues that there's something else going on. So we can notice this when a client comes into sessions. And of course, we can offer things there to support them. I like to get to know my clients and understand what works for them in terms of regulation. So I might just say, how do you make yourself feel calmer? I might not say, how do you calm your nervous system, but what makes you feel calmer? And if they're really stuck, these are a few things that we can do. Movement, we can listen to music, we can do a visualization, we can do some breathing, we can do a meditation, you can journal before you come in, you can just offload and I can listen. What's going to work best for you? So actually helping them to start to think about what they need, because nervous system regulation is a skill. And if we can do it, we can also learn to regulate our emotions. For someone with ADHD, that is probably the hardest thing for me to do. But if we are able to do that, then we are able to have more impactful conversations. Because if the nervous system is running the show, we're not going to remember as much, because actually our short-term memory is not working as well. So actually our encoding of memories is not working as well. So getting into the right state at the beginning. But then, of course, our clients and us as coaches are probably going to be activated in the session. So noticing difference, exploring with the client in that always being curious space, holding space. And what that means is holding what is going on, exploring, using silence. I've got a friend and she says her favorite question as a coach is silence. because in that silence, so much can happen. And then we might be thinking about, we talked about how we can support. There's another great one, actually. We have this nerve that runs from the base of our neck all the way down to the base of our spine. It's called the vagus nerve, and it's the longest nerve in our body. And again, it's very much linked to the nervous system. There's something called polyvagal theory, which was written about a lot by Deb Dana. And it's thinking about actually, they talk about toning your vagus nerve. And you might have heard this if you've done yoga, meditation, because people talk a lot about building our capacity to regulate ourselves. And one of the things that you can do is you can actually, if you're ever doing this, I don't know if anyone else notices themselves like kind of, rubbing that top of their spine, you're actually toning your vagus nerve there. That is something that lots of people learn to do and they don't even realize. But giving yourself that space to pause, to breathe. People do cold water immersion, not my thing, but people do that because that helps the vagus nerve. But there's a really simple thing that we can do in coaching, and I'm doing it now. When we smile, that actually supports nervous system regulation. And when we smile, it's contagious. So actually, sometimes just smiling in a session can support your client's nervous system. Obviously not smiling when they're sharing something that is really activating for them, or when they have just disclosed something they have never shared with someone else. But that unconditional positive regard, that humanness, that connection helps the nervous system. We are wired for connection. And one of the things that lots of new coaches say to me is sometimes we don't have to find the little clues. Sometimes the clues are very obvious. For example, a client starts crying, and that can make us feel uncomfortable. What do we do when someone starts crying? We might want to go into fix-it mode. Let's rescue that person. Let's make it okay. But that's not our job. Our job is to support. Our job is to help our clients find resources. So if somebody is crying, give them space. And I remember coaching someone a few years ago, and we were actually towards the end of the session, and they had got some powerful insights about what they were going to do. They were having quite a challenging relationship with their partner, and they were thinking about what would happen when they were triggered by them, because they were starting to have like kind of emotional conversations. They weren't regulating themselves, and it was escalating. And so they came up with some really simple strategies, but when they were doing it, they started crying. So they were saying, it's so simple, yet I haven't been doing it. And so there was probably some guilt there that they hadn't, maybe a bit of shame. And then I recognized that I didn't give them enough space to process the emotion. I tried to move them on. And so in that moment, I actually said, I'm sorry, what do you need? And they took a bit longer, and then we moved on. So sometimes we'll move people on too quickly. I would say if someone is processing emotion, if someone is crying, give them space. We label crying as bad in our society. I don't know why. Crying releases cortisol. It's actually the body's own stress reduction system. So why are we treating it as bad? Crying doesn't mean that we're necessarily sad. It can mean that we're letting go of frustration that we felt with ourselves. It might be that that we are moving on from shame or guilt. So use it as a sign to explore. So remembering, if the nervous system is running the show, what are we seeing? How are we getting into the right state? How are we exploring? How are we regulating? How are we modeling? How are we offering different things like breathing or movement or space or meditation or visualization if our clients are open to them? I'd love to know in the comments, what do you do to regulate your nervous system and what works for you? And if you want to find out more about how we integrate this into our training, come over and check us out at Optimus Coach Academy. Thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe, and comment below.